Elias lived on the edge of the world, or at least, what felt like the edge of everything he knew. The planet's surface stretched for miles in every direction, a patchwork of copper-brown soil, jagged rocks, and the pale green of hardy crops he had coaxed into life. There were no cities here, no buzzing machines beyond what he had built himself. It was quiet, so quiet that the hum of the wind across the fields became a comforting companion. Years ago, Elias had come here as part of a colonization mission. The plan had been grand. A team of scientists, engineers, and farmers would transform the planet into a home for humans. But time had other plans. Communications with Earth had failed, fellow colonists had left or perished, and Elias had been left alone, a single human against an entire alien world. Despite the loneliness, Elias found purpose. Every morning he rose with the sun, his bare feet brushing against the cool soil, and set about his work. The fields were his life, the machines his friends, and the quiet nights his reward. He had learned to read the weather like a book, understanding the faintest signs in the clouds and the smell of the soil to know when the rains would come. His crops were modest compared to Earth's standards, but they were enough. They were proof that a human, armed with patience and ingenuity, could tame even a wild world. Elias moved with practiced efficiency. He checked the irrigation lines he had laid down months before, noting the small leaks and sealing them with strips of rubber and resin he had salvaged from old machinery. The drones he had built from spare parts hovered over the fields, monitoring the growth of plants and scanning for pests. He sometimes talked to them aloud, half joking, half in loneliness. "Don't get lazy today, you lot," he said once, watching a drone hover above a patch of tomato-like plants. "I know you can do better." The drones, of course, did not answer. But that was fine. Humans had always been the kind of creatures who could speak into silence and expect it to matter. Meals were simple. Elias had learned to make bread from a grain that grew well in the planet's soil, and to roast root vegetables over a fire. He drank water purified from a nearby stream, and sometimes indulged in the fermented fruit that grew wild near the cliffs. Occasionally, he would remember Earth, the taste of fresh oranges, the smell of rain on pavement, the chatter of cities, but those memories were bittersweet. He had accepted that this planet was now his home, and there was a strange comfort in the rhythm of solitude. Evenings were his favorite time. The sky turned a deep violet as two suns, one larger, one smaller, sank toward the horizon. Shadows stretched across the fields, and the air cooled. Elias would sit outside his modest home, carved from local stone and reinforced with metal salvaged from his crashed ship, and watch. He watched the stars. Unlike Earth, the constellations were unfamiliar, scattered in patterns he did not recognize, and yet they felt welcoming. He sometimes imagined the stars were other humans, watching from far away, waiting for him to make his mark. It was during one of these evenings, as the second sun disappeared behind the mountains, that Elias noticed something unusual. A sound, faint, almost imperceptible at first, reached him over the soft rustle of the wind. It was a cry, a human-like sound of fear and confusion. Elias froze, his hand resting on the handle of a wrench at his side. The farm was far from anything else, and any visitor was an anomaly. Even predators rarely came this close, yet the sound persisted, weak but urgent. Elias moved cautiously toward the edge of his property, the tall grass brushing against his legs. There, partially obscured by the shadows, he saw her. A figure hunched and trembling with skin that shimmered faintly in the dying light. She looked alien, unlike any creature he had seen in his years on the planet. Her limbs were long and delicate, her eyes wide with fear. Yet there was something familiar in the way she pressed her hands against her face, the way she cried. Elias did not hesitate. He approached slowly, careful not to frighten her further. "It's okay," he said, his voice low and calm. "I won't hurt you." She flinched at first, then froze, her wide eyes tracking his movements. Elias noticed that she had no clothes, but he did not let his thoughts linger. The planet was harsh. Survival was the priority. He grabbed a large piece of cloth from his home and draped it over a nearby rock, motioning for her to come forward. Slowly, hesitantly, she moved, the tremor in her steps betraying her exhaustion. Once she was close enough, Elias knelt and offered water from a flask. The alien sniffled, hesitated, then took it, drinking greedily. Elias watched her carefully. Her body was fragile but resilient, and her movements suggested intelligence and awareness. He did not know her language, but he understood one thing clearly: she needed help. He guided her to his home, speaking softly all the way. "We'll get you cleaned up, safe, you'll be okay." Inside, Elias offered warmth and food. He had canned vegetables, preserved fruit, and bread. She ate slowly, her eyes darting around the room, taking in every detail, the metal tools, the crude furniture, the pictures he had made of his crops. Elias watched, fascinated. Even in her fear, there was curiosity, a reminder that the universe was full of life and humans were part of it. As the night deepened, the alien curled up on a blanket, shivering. Elias tended a small fire, the flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. He thought about the years he had spent alone, the countless nights when silence had been his only companion. And now, here was someone from another world trusting him enough to accept his help. He wondered what had brought her here. A shipwreck? An experiment gone wrong? He would not know yet. But he did know that humans had a long history of solving problems, of turning impossible situations into survival. And survival was what he would offer her. The days that followed were a test of patience and ingenuity. The alien, whom he still had not named, was wary of his touch but curious about his world. Elias taught her to drink from a container, to eat safely, and to avoid the more dangerous parts of the property. He studied her reactions, noting patterns and signs. She was intelligent, capable of understanding more than she could express. And Elias realized something profound. No matter how alien her body, her survival instincts mirrored his own. Elias set about improving the shelter for both of them. He reinforced walls, secured the perimeter, and modified the small hydroponic setup to provide fresh vegetables she could safely eat. He crafted tools for her, simple things she could handle without his constant supervision. Every action was an exercise in ingenuity, a human trait he had honed over years of isolation. And through it all, he spoke softly, describing the stars, the plants, the machines. Perhaps she understood the words, perhaps not. But humans had always known that communication was more than language. It was care, attention, and shared effort. By the end of the first week, the alien had grown calmer. She explored the home carefully, touched the tools, and even smiled faintly at a small mechanical bird Elias had built. He realized then that humans were remarkable not just because of strength or intelligence, but because of the ability to reach out, to connect, to nurture life, even alien life, into stability and safety. One evening, as the twin suns set, Elias and the alien stood outside. She watched the horizon with curiosity, her eyes reflecting the light in a way that made Elias think of the first time he had seen Earth from orbit. He did not speak, he only observed. And she did not speak either. But in that silence there was understanding. Humans had survived against impossible odds. They had tamed planets, crossed stars, and built lives where none seemed possible. And now, even on a remote world, that resilience was proving itself again. Elias smiled faintly. He did not know what the future held, whether she was alone, whether her people would come, whether they would even survive this world. But he knew one thing with certainty. Humans had a way of turning solitude into strength, fear into action, and isolation into a spark of life. Whatever came next, he would face it as he had faced every challenge before, with patience, ingenuity, and unwavering resolve. And for the first time in years, Elias did not feel completely alone. Days passed quietly on the farm, but the quiet had changed. It was no longer the solitary peace that Elias had grown used to. It was a living quiet, filled with the soft rustle of alien footsteps, the occasional murmur from the woman he had rescued, and the hum of his machines. Elias observed her closely. She moved with careful curiosity, touching the soil, the tools, the walls of his home. She had no name yet, no language he could understand, but her presence had a strange effect on him. The farm no longer felt empty, and even the silence seemed warmer. Elias decided to focus on communication. Humans had always been adaptable, capable of finding ways to connect across boundaries. He started with simple gestures. He pointed to objects, repeated words, and offered food while saying its name. The alien watched, sometimes mirroring his gestures, sometimes tilting her head in confusion. He realized it would take patience. It always did. He began to teach her survival skills. First, the most basic, how to drink water safely, how to eat the food he had grown or preserved, and how to avoid the natural hazards around their home. The alien was quick to learn. She watched carefully and imitated his movements, often with surprising precision. Elias noted the intelligence in her eyes. She was not merely reacting. She was thinking, analyzing, and adapting. In return, she began showing him things he had never seen. Small gestures, patterns of movement, even simple signs that revealed an understanding of the environment he had not considered. One morning, she led him to a section of the nearby forest where the soil was softer, the plants stronger. She pointed, gestured, and finally, using a strange hum, indicated that certain plants were edible and nutritious. Elias marveled at the thought. Here was an alien being whose knowledge was entirely different, yet complementary to his own. Humans had always thrived when combining intelligence and experience, and he felt that same principle working here, bridging worlds. The days became a routine of shared work. Elias repaired and improved his machines while teaching the alien to help with simple tasks. She could operate a lever, turn a handle, or move supplies in ways that lightened his load. He marveled at how efficiently she learned, her alien muscles precise and controlled. There were moments when frustration flared, miscommunication, misunderstandings, but patience always won. Humans had endured worse, Elias reminded himself. Time and effort could turn confusion into understanding. As they worked, Elias noticed other changes. The alien seemed to respond to music or sounds, tilting her head toward the low hum of his water pump, the rhythm of his workbench hammering. He began to experiment, creating simple tunes by tapping metal rods or using small wind chimes he had constructed. She reacted, often with quiet excitement, sometimes mimicking the sounds with her own voice, creating patterns he could not yet interpret. It was not language, but it was communication. Humans had always turned sounds into messages, and he realized he could teach her in the same way. Their bond grew stronger during the evenings. Elias would sit by the fire, crafting small tools, repairing machinery, or simply watching the alien explore the home he had built. She often approached cautiously, touching the tools, tilting her head at the flickering flames, or kneeling to feel the warmth of the fire. He watched her, fascinated by her curiosity and intelligence. Humans had a deep need for companionship, and he recognized it in himself. Even after years of solitude, the presence of another being, even one from another world, brought comfort and purpose. One afternoon, Elias decided it was time to teach her how to protect herself. Predators were not common near the farm, but the planet was unpredictable. Elias fashioned simple weapons from tools and scraps, showing her how to use them for defense, emphasizing caution and observation over aggression. She learned quickly, her movements precise, her understanding intuitive. There were no mistakes, only learning. Elias realized that her survival instincts were strong, honed in ways that were unfamiliar to him but effective nonetheless. Humans had always survived by adapting, and now he was witnessing another species doing the same. The alien, whose intelligence and perception fascinated Elias, began showing signs of memory and thought. She would point to parts of the farm, gesture at machinery, and sometimes hum in patterns that suggested recognition or intent. Elias responded with gestures of his own, teaching her the names of objects, the meaning of signals, and even the basics of his log system. Humans had always used records to preserve knowledge, and now he was sharing that skill with someone entirely different. It was slow work, full of repetition and patience, but he relished every small breakthrough. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, Elias noticed a change. The alien approached him, carrying a small, glowing stone she had found near the cliffs. She placed it in his hand and made a motion that suggested gratitude or offering. Elias studied the stone, recognizing it as a mineral he had never seen before, possibly useful for tools or energy storage. He smiled, realizing the potential of collaboration. Humans had always benefited from cooperation, whether with one another or with the environment, and now, for the first time, he was experiencing the same with an alien being. As nights passed, Elias began to feel a sense of routine returning. The alien would follow him to the fields, observe his work, and sometimes assist in minor ways. She had not yet spoken in words he could understand, but her gestures were clear enough. She pointed, mimicked, and sometimes created her own tools from scraps, demonstrating creativity he had not anticipated. Humans had always been creative problem solvers, and he realized that creativity could exist in other forms beyond the human body. It was a shared trait, a bridge between worlds. Elias also began to notice her reactions to the natural world. She was fascinated by the stars, tilting her head as if studying their patterns, pointing to constellations he did not recognize, and making hums that seemed like questions. He realized that she might have her own knowledge, her own culture, her own understanding of the universe. Humans had always thrived by learning from others, and now he was being given the same opportunity. The alien's perspective expanded his own understanding of the world, teaching him patience, observation, and wonder in ways he had almost forgotten. Challenges arose as well. One day, a sudden storm swept across the valley. Strong winds bent the crops, and torrential rain threatened to flood the irrigation channels. Elias worked frantically, securing the fields, reinforcing barriers, and guiding the alien to help carry supplies to safety. Her movements were quick and precise, showing trust and understanding. Together, they weathered the storm, a testament to human perseverance and the power of cooperation. Humans had survived countless storms, both literal and metaphorical, and Elias realized that this alien companion was becoming part of that survival story. With each passing day, Elias felt the bond strengthen. The alien learned, adapted, and even began to anticipate his needs. She would move tools closer, adjust mechanisms, or simply offer a comforting presence when he was exhausted. Humans had always been social creatures, thriving on teamwork and shared effort, and he was reminded of that fundamental truth. Even in isolation, the capacity to connect could turn solitude into strength. One evening, Elias decided to try a new approach. He drew pictures in the dirt, illustrating simple concepts: water, fire, crops, shelter. The alien watched intently, then mimicked the shapes with her hands. Elias felt a surge of hope. Communication, even across species, was possible. Humans had always found ways to connect, to teach, to learn, and now he was witnessing that timeless ability in action. As the twin suns set, Elias and the alien sat side by side, watching the sky. She hummed softly, and he responded with a low whistle, creating a rhythm together. Words were unnecessary. Understanding had grown beyond language. Humans had always relied on ingenuity, patience, and empathy, and in that moment all three were at work. Elias smiled, realizing that survival was not just about strength or skill, it was about connection, trust, and shared effort. The alien shifted closer, resting against him, a silent acknowledgement of safety and companionship. Elias reflected on the long years of solitude he had endured, the challenges he had faced alone. Now he was not alone. Humans had always persevered against impossible odds, and the presence of this alien being, learning, adapting, and trusting him, was proof that connection could transcend worlds. Elias did not yet know her story, where she came from, what dangers she had faced, or what her people might be. But he understood that their partnership was only beginning. Humans had always thrived by facing the unknown with courage and ingenuity. And now, he had found an ally, an unexpected partner, and a reason to continue striving, learning, and surviving. As night deepened, the wind whispered through the fields, carrying the scent of damp earth and growing crops. Elias and the alien sat quietly, observing the stars. He imagined the worlds beyond, civilizations he might never see, and the mysteries that awaited. Yet he felt confident because humans had a way of overcoming the impossible. And now they were no longer alone, two beings from different worlds, learning, adapting, and surviving together. And in that quiet moment, Elias knew that the real adventure was only beginning. The mornings on the farm had a steady rhythm now. Elias and the alien moved together like a single unit. She no longer needed to be guided through every action. She anticipated tasks, lifted objects carefully, and mimicked his work. Elias had begun to think of her as a partner rather than a burden. She was intelligent, adaptable, and curious. Even without words, she taught him as much as he taught her. One morning, as the twin suns began to rise over the distant mountains, the alien led Elias toward the cliffs beyond his fields. She moved with purpose, gesturing insistently for him to follow. Curiosity piqued, Elias obeyed. The path was rocky and steep, but she climbed with agility, stopping frequently to glance back at him, making sure he was keeping pace. Humans were built for endurance, Elias reminded himself, and he took careful, measured steps to match her pace. At the top of the cliff, she paused and pointed toward the horizon. In the distance, a faint glow flickered intermittently, like a signal. Elias squinted. The planet's surface was vast and mostly empty, but this light was unusual. He instinctively knew it was not natural. Perhaps a ship or some other kind of craft. His pulse quickened. Humans had always thrived by observing, analyzing, and acting upon unknown phenomena. He signaled for her to stay close, then cautiously approached the edge to study the glow. The alien crouched beside him, her eyes wide, reflecting both fear and excitement. Elias tried to communicate, pointing to the light and then to himself, indicating a question. What was it? She responded with gestures of her own, small movements of her hands and head that suggested urgency. Elias understood enough to know that this was not just a curiosity. Something was out there, something that mattered. Humans had always survived by preparing for the unknown, and this was another test. Returning to the farm, Elias began preparations. He reinforced the perimeter, checked his drones, and examined his supply of tools and weapons. The alien watched, occasionally mimicking his actions, helping where she could. Her understanding of his machines was limited, but she had a unique perspective, suggesting movements and actions he had not considered. Elias marveled at her adaptability. Humans had always learned from experience, and now he was learning from an entirely new form of intelligence. By the second day, he had configured his drones to patrol the perimeter and monitor the distant light. The alien assisted, placing small sensors on rocks and adjusting levers under his guidance. Together, they created a simple but effective early warning system. Humans had always been resourceful, turning whatever was at hand into tools for survival. Elias realized that his companion, though alien, shared that trait instinctively. That night the wind carried a strange, low hum from the direction of the light. Elias listened, crouched by the fire, his senses alert. The alien shivered, a mixture of fear and recognition in her posture. He reached out, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Humans had always survived by offering protection, by inspiring trust in those who depended on them. He was now living that truth with someone from another world. In the following days, the glow grew stronger. Elias and the alien studied its pattern and timing. Sometimes it blinked in intervals, other times it pulsed steadily. She attempted to reproduce the signals herself, tapping rocks and humming as if trying to communicate with whatever was out there. Elias watched, fascinated. Humans had always relied on ingenuity to solve problems. Now that ingenuity was mirrored across species in a form he could not have imagined. One evening, as the suns dipped below the horizon, the alien suddenly gestured urgently for Elias to follow. She ran ahead to a small ravine where she crouched near a patch of disturbed soil. Elias knelt beside her, examining the area. Tracks, unlike anything he had seen, led from the ravine toward the distant glow. Her movements indicated that these tracks were dangerous, or at least significant. Humans had always interpreted signs in the environment, and this was no different. Over the next few days, Elias and the alien monitored the tracks, mapping them carefully. They discovered that predators, large and intelligent, had begun to roam closer to the farm. Their movements were not random. They seemed drawn toward the energy of the distant light. Elias adjusted defenses, setting traps and reinforcing barriers. The alien assisted in her own way, pointing to vulnerable spots and helping to carry supplies. Humans had survived harsh predators before, relying on observation, strategy, and quick thinking. Elias relied on the same skills now, teaching and learning alongside his alien companion. One afternoon, a predator approached, sleek and fast, with a body designed for stalking and ambush. Elias and the alien were ready. They signaled to each other silently, moving into position. The predator lunged, and Elias triggered a trap he had set, a combination of nets and tensioned ropes. The alien moved with precision, guiding the predator into the trap. When the danger passed, Elias exhaled, feeling a surge of respect for his companion. Humans had always survived by working together, and this was another example of cooperation across boundaries. As the nights passed, the alien began to reveal more about herself, through gestures, symbols, and repeated hums. Elias discovered that the distant light was from her people, a signal for rescue or guidance. She showed images of her world, of cities built on massive platforms, of skies filled with strange flying crafts. Humans had always been curious, always learning from others, and Elias felt that same excitement building. He realized that survival was not just about living, it was about understanding, adapting, and sharing knowledge. Elias and the alien began experimenting with communication. They created symbols in the dirt, matching them to objects, actions, and directions. Slowly, they developed a rudimentary system. She could indicate hunger, thirst, or danger. He could explain simple tasks, tools, and concepts. Humans had always built bridges through language, and now he was building one with someone from another world. Every breakthrough felt like a triumph, proof that connection could overcome isolation. The alien also learned to use the drones, guiding them with small gestures. Together, they mapped the nearby terrain, marking hazards and resources. Humans had always thrived by exploring their environment, understanding it, and using it to their advantage. Now, Elias saw that same principle at work across species. Her perspective revealed shortcuts, dangers, and opportunities he had never noticed alone. One morning, Elias noticed a subtle change in her behavior. She moved with more confidence, explored further from the shelter, and even attempted small tasks independently. Humans had always grown stronger through experience and practice, and he realized that she too was learning the rhythm of life on this planet. There was an unmistakable spark of pride in her movements, a sign that she trusted herself and him. But survival was never easy. A sudden storm struck, stronger than any Elias had seen before. Torrential rain and violent winds threatened to destroy his crops and damage his shelter. He shouted instructions to the alien, pointing to supports, guiding her to reinforce barriers and moving equipment to safety. She responded instantly, placing beams, holding levers, and assisting in ways that were both instinctive and learned. Humans had always survived extreme weather by acting decisively and using their intelligence. Together, they weathered the storm, stronger for having faced it as a team. After the storm, Elias took stock of their resources. Crops had survived, but some were damaged. The alien helped him replant, carry water, and clear debris. Elias marveled at her efficiency. Humans had always relied on creativity and adaptability to rebuild after disasters. He realized that these qualities were universal, present even in life forms he had never imagined. One evening, as the sun set, Elias finally felt a moment of peace. The alien sat beside him, examining the stars. He pointed to a distant constellation, then to himself, and repeated the gesture several times. She watched, then pointed to herself, then back to him. A simple understanding passed between them, humans and aliens, separate but connected, sharing knowledge and survival. Humans had always thrived on relationships, cooperation, and learning from one another. Elias now recognized the universality of that principle. In the days that followed, Elias began teaching her more advanced tasks. She learned to repair the drones, operate simple tools, and even manage small sections of the farm independently. Humans had always passed knowledge across generations, and now he was passing it across species. Every success strengthened their bond, and every failure taught them both humility. The alien also began leaving small gifts for Elias, smooth stones, pieces of metal she had found, and markings in the dirt that suggested thought or observation. Humans had always expressed gratitude and creativity in small ways, and he recognized the same instinct in her. He smiled, realizing that connection, empathy, and appreciation were not uniquely human. They were survival traits shared across intelligent life. Finally, the time came when the distant light pulsed more urgently than ever. Elias and the alien prepared for what they now understood. Contact with her people was imminent. She gestured toward the horizon, then to the sky, indicating travel. Elias packed tools, food, and supplies, preparing for the unknown. Humans had always faced the unknown with courage, curiosity, and adaptability. Now he would do it again, not alone, but with a partner who had become as indispensable as any fellow human. As the suns disappeared behind the mountains, Elias looked at the alien beside him. She had grown stronger, more confident, and more capable. She had learned from him just as he had learned from her. Humans had always thrived through shared knowledge, mutual support, and ingenuity. This was no different, except it was proof that those traits could transcend worlds. And as the first faint glimmers of her people's arrival approached, Elias felt hope. Humans had always faced challenges, adapted, and survived. Now, together with an alien ally, he would continue that tradition, exploring the unknown and proving that intelligence, courage, and collaboration were universal forces. The adventure was only beginning, and for the first time in years, Elias felt the thrill of the unknown not as a threat, but as a promise. The glow on the horizon grew brighter with each passing day. Elias and the alien, whom he had begun to think of as Lyra, watched as a series of crafts descended slowly from the sky. They were sleek, larger than anything Elias had seen before, and they moved with precise coordination, responding to a force he could not yet comprehend. Humans had always been fascinated by the unknown, yet now he felt it firsthand, awe, fear, and hope blending together in equal measure. He stood beside Lyra, his hands brushing hers briefly in an instinctive gesture of solidarity. She seemed to understand, her eyes meeting his, conveying both reassurance and urgency. The first craft landed a few hundred meters from the farm. Its surface shimmered, reflecting the twin suns of the planet. Doors opened, and several figures emerged, their forms elegant, tall, and humanoid, but undeniably alien. Elias noted the difference. Their limbs were longer, movements smoother, and their skin glimmered faintly with iridescence. Humans had always survived first encounters with patience and observation, and Elias followed the same instinct, stepping forward cautiously but confidently. Lyra stepped ahead of him, gesturing toward her people. Elias stayed behind, watching and learning. The aliens approached with curiosity but not hostility. They paused near Lyra, exchanging a series of hums and gestures. Elias recognized that they were communicating, their language based on tones, gestures, and subtle expressions. He marveled at the structure of it, trying to understand the patterns. Humans had always been able to learn from others, even vastly different species, and he realized he could do the same here. One of the aliens, taller than the rest, approached Elias cautiously. It tilted its head, observed him, and then extended a limb in a gesture resembling a handshake. Elias hesitated, then stepped forward and grasped it. The pressure was firm but gentle. Humans had always been quick to adapt socially, even when faced with unfamiliar customs, and he felt a surge of pride in his ability to bridge the gap between worlds. Lyra introduced Elias through gestures and simple tones, showing that he had been her protector and teacher. The aliens observed the farm carefully, their eyes flicking over the fields, the machinery, and the traps Elias had set. They seemed impressed, exchanging hums that Elias interpreted as curiosity and approval. Humans had always relied on creativity and resourcefulness, and it seemed that even another intelligent species could recognize those qualities. As the initial greetings concluded, a sudden disturbance occurred. A low growl echoed from the nearby forest. Elias tensed, recognizing the sound immediately. One of the predators had returned. But this time it was not alone. A pack moved with coordination, their eyes glowing faintly in the twilight. Humans had always survived by anticipating danger and responding quickly. Elias signaled to Lyra and the aliens, pointing toward the threat, preparing to defend the farm. The predators advanced, but Elias and his allies were ready. The drones buzzed overhead, releasing nets and sensors to confuse and deter the attackers. Elias activated traps with precision, while Lyra moved among the aliens, guiding them in defensive maneuvers. Together, they created a line of defense that combined human ingenuity, alien coordination, and natural observation. The predators hesitated, then retreated, demonstrating the effectiveness of teamwork. Humans had always used strategy and tools to survive, and this moment reinforced that truth in the presence of allies from another world. After the attack, Elias surveyed the damage. Minor repairs were needed, but nothing catastrophic. Lyra assisted, guiding the aliens to help with the work. Humans had always rebuilt after disasters, often stronger than before. Elias marveled at the way different species could cooperate when survival was at stake, learning from each other and sharing knowledge. It was a powerful reminder that ingenuity and determination were universal tools for survival. Over the next several days, Elias worked closely with Lyra's people. They shared knowledge, exchanging ideas about farming, water purification, and energy management. They demonstrated technology that Elias could barely comprehend: energy storage devices, advanced sensors, and materials stronger than steel yet lighter than aluminum. Humans had always adapted, learning from new environments and tools, and Elias absorbed everything he could, modifying their technology to suit the planet and his needs. Lyra's people were fascinated by the farm, observing how Elias had survived in isolation for years. They asked questions through gestures and symbols, and Elias responded in kind. Humans had always been effective communicators, able to convey complex ideas with limited resources. Now he was teaching an alien species about human survival techniques, showing that resilience, patience, and creativity were not unique to humans, but something he could share. One night, a sudden alarm from the perimeter sensors alerted them to another threat. Elias and the aliens rushed to the source, discovering a larger predator than any they had encountered, a creature massive and powerful, with sharp claws and keen intelligence. Humans had always faced dangerous beasts with ingenuity rather than brute force alone. Elias coordinated with Lyra and the aliens, using drones, traps, and strategic placement to divert the predator away from the farm. The operation required precision, timing, and trust. Each ally moved instinctively, demonstrating the effectiveness of cooperation across species. The predator was eventually trapped and driven away, and Elias allowed himself a moment of relief. Humans had always endured against predators and natural disasters, relying on intelligence and teamwork. Now he saw that those same traits could bridge worlds. Lyra's people approached him afterward, conveying gratitude and approval through their gestures and hums. He smiled, realizing that survival was a shared endeavor, strengthened by collaboration. As the suns rose the next day, Elias reflected on how far they had come. Lyra had grown stronger, more confident, and capable of understanding and operating complex systems. The alien group had integrated into his routines, learning human survival techniques while sharing their own knowledge. Humans had always been adaptable, and this partnership was proof that adaptability could extend beyond species boundaries. Then came a moment that tested them all. A massive storm brewed over the mountains, unlike any Ilias had experienced. Winds howled, rain fell in sheets, and lightning struck with unpredictable intensity. Humans had always relied on ingenuity to weather natural disasters, and this storm was no exception. Ilias coordinated defenses, signaling Lyra and the aliens to reinforce barriers, secure equipment, and protect the crops. Together, they worked tirelessly, combining human determination with alien efficiency and coordination. The storm raged through the night, battering the farm and testing every precaution. Ilias and his allies remained vigilant, moving between tasks, supporting one another and adapting to the changing conditions. Humans had always survived through preparation, quick thinking, and persistence. Now those traits were multiplied across species, creating a defense stronger than any individual could provide. By morning, the storm had passed. The farm had sustained damage, but the losses were minimal. Crops were bent but recoverable, structures remained intact, and the predators had been driven away. Ilias surveyed the scene with a sense of pride. Humans had always endured, and with Lyra and her people, he realized they had achieved something greater than mere survival. They had built resilience together. In the following days, they repaired damage, strengthened defenses, and improved communication systems. Ilias taught the aliens how to tend crops, manage irrigation, and operate tools more efficiently. They shared their own knowledge in return, demonstrating energy systems, weather monitoring devices, and ways to enhance soil fertility using techniques unfamiliar to humans. Humans had always advanced by learning from new information, and Ilias applied that principle to his partnership with Lyra and her people. Trust deepened during this time. Ilias and Lyra worked seamlessly together, anticipating each other's needs and movements. Humans had always thrived through teamwork, and the bond between him and the alien demonstrated that cooperation was not limited to a single species. Lyra's people also came to rely on him, not just for survival, but for guidance in understanding this planet. Humans had always been leaders and innovators, and Ilias embodied that trait, bridging worlds through knowledge, action, and empathy. Finally, the time came for Lyra to reconnect fully with her people. They had repaired a communication device and were ready to send a signal back to their homeworld. Ilias watched as she prepared, her movements precise and confident. Humans had always faced the unknown with courage, and now he felt that same courage reflected in her actions. He understood that this moment was not an ending but a transition, proof that survival, ingenuity, and partnership could create opportunities that no individual effort could achieve. Before leaving, Lyra approached Ilias. She placed a hand on his shoulder and offered a series of gestures he had come to understand as gratitude, trust, and respect. Ilias nodded, returning the sentiment in his own way. Humans had always valued connection, and this silent exchange carried as much meaning as any words could. As Lyra and her people ascended toward the sky, Ilias watched, reflecting on the journey that had brought them together. Humans had always endured against impossible odds, using ingenuity, patience, and cooperation. Now he realized that these traits could extend beyond species, across worlds, creating bonds and solutions that transcended isolation. The farm was quiet once more, but Ilias did not feel alone. He had faced predators, storms, and uncertainty, yet survived and thrived through intellect, skill, and partnership. Humans had always been builders, protectors, and innovators. He had proven that, not only to himself, but to beings from another world. And as the glow of Lyra's crafts disappeared over the horizon, Ilias felt a renewed sense of purpose. Humans had always adapted, survived, and risen above challenges. Now he knew that even across the vast distances of space, those same qualities could connect life, inspire hope, and create resilience stronger than any one species alone. The adventure was far from over. The planet still held mysteries, predators still roamed, and the future was unknown. But Ilias smiled, ready for whatever came next. Humans had always faced the impossible, and now he faced it with the knowledge that ingenuity, courage, and cooperation could overcome any obstacle, no matter how alien or daunting. The twin suns rose over the horizon, casting pale light across the farm. Ilias stood at the edge of the fields, observing the distant shimmer of Lyra's people's crafts in the sky. For weeks, they had worked together, repairing, learning, and surviving. Now the final test of their teamwork was at hand. Sensors from the distant cliffs had detected movement, something far larger and more dangerous than any predator Elias had encountered before. Humans had always faced the unknown with courage and ingenuity, and this was the ultimate challenge. Lyra appeared at his side, her eyes wide with a mix of determination and worry. Elias placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Words were unnecessary. Their bond had grown strong enough that silent understanding sufficed. They moved together toward the perimeter, checking traps and preparing defenses. Humans had always adapted to danger through observation, preparation, and quick action, and Elias embodied those traits fully. By mid-morning, the threat became clear. A massive herd of creatures, enormous and coordinated, moved across the valley, drawn toward the energy signals from Lyra's people's crafts. Their bodies were armored, their movements calculated, and their presence sent tremors through the soil. Elias recognized immediately that this was beyond anything he had faced before. Humans had survived harsh landscapes and predators, but ingenuity and planning would be the key to overcoming this new challenge. He turned to Lyra, gesturing for her to signal her people. They responded with a series of movements and low hums, coordinating a plan that combined their advanced technology with Elias' simple yet effective traps. Humans had always thrived by thinking creatively under pressure, using tools, terrain, and strategy to their advantage. Now, those principles would be applied in a larger, more dangerous context. Elias positioned the drones along the edges of the valley, instructing Lyra to assist in monitoring the herd. The aliens deployed energy barriers that pulsed in rhythm with their hums, creating temporary obstacles that confused the creatures. Elias set up nets, levers, and tensioned ropes in strategic locations, relying on his knowledge of mechanics and the creature's behavior. Humans had always survived by combining intelligence with action, and he relied on that instinct fully. The herd advanced steadily, and the first clashes began. The energy barriers deflected some of the creatures, while drones activated traps that slowed others. Elias moved among them, adjusting mechanisms, reinforcing supports, and directing Lyra and her people with precise gestures. Humans had always excelled in adaptability, turning small tools into effective solutions. His quick thinking and ingenuity kept them one step ahead. A particularly large creature broke through one of the barriers, its bulk threatening to crush everything in its path. Elias leapt into action, using a combination of ropes and levers to redirect it toward a secondary trap. Lyra assisted, guiding her people to adjust the energy pulses. Together, they created a system where technology, instinct, and simple mechanics worked in harmony. Humans had always survived by learning from experience, and Elias was now demonstrating that timeless ability on a scale that would challenge any observer. Hours passed. The creatures were relentless, testing every barrier, every trap, and every measure Elias had implemented. Yet humans had always persevered through endurance, determination, and cooperation. Elias, Lyra, and her people adjusted continuously, anticipating movements, predicting reactions, and improvising solutions. Each success built confidence, each failure taught a lesson. The bond between human and alien had never been stronger, and it became the foundation for their strategy. As the suns began to set, Elias recognized an opportunity. The herd was following predictable patterns, herding toward a narrow canyon. He signaled Lyra, who understood immediately, coordinating her people to adjust energy pulses and lure the creatures along the intended path. Humans had always used observation and ingenuity to manipulate their environment to advantage, and this was a perfect example. The creatures followed, constrained by barriers and traps. Elias triggered a sequence of levers, releasing nets and temporary barriers that funneled the herd into the canyon. The energy pulses from Lyra's people guided the creatures with surprising precision. Humans had always solved problems by combining planning, skill, and action. This collaboration with another species was a testament to that principle. Once the herd was contained, the valley fell silent. Elias and Lyra surveyed the scene. The creatures were alive but trapped safely, their movements limited by a combination of human traps and alien technology. Humans had always valued survival over destruction, and the same principle applied here. Elias allowed himself a moment to breathe, feeling a surge of pride. Ingenuity, teamwork, and courage had prevailed. Lyra approached him, gesturing in her own way, expressing gratitude and approval. Elias responded with a smile, patting her shoulder. Humans had always found ways to communicate appreciation beyond words, and this moment carried more meaning than any sentence could convey. They had faced the impossible and succeeded. proving that survival, creativity, and cooperation could overcome even overwhelming odds. In the following days, Elias worked alongside Lyra's people to ensure the creatures were relocated safely. They built barriers that guided them towards safer territories and monitored their behavior. Humans had always acted responsibly, balancing survival with respect for life, and Elias applied the same principles here. Lyra assisted, demonstrating care and attention that mirrored his own instincts. Together, they ensured the ecosystem remained balanced. During this time, communication between Elias and Lyra improved dramatically. Using symbols, gestures, and tones, they conveyed complex ideas about strategy, engineering, and resource management. Humans had always shared knowledge to strengthen communities, and now he was doing the same across species. Lyra absorbed information quickly, applying it in practical ways that enhanced their effectiveness. It was a partnership built on trust, skill, and shared goals. One morning, Lyra led Elias to a vantage point overlooking the valley. She gestured toward distant signals in the sky, indicating that her people were ready to leave the planet and return home. Elias felt a pang of emotion. Humans had always experienced connection, even brief, and now he realized how deeply he valued her companionship. He gestured back, showing understanding and support. Their bond had grown beyond survival. It was now rooted in mutual respect and trust. Before departure, Elias and Lyra's people worked together to strengthen the farm. Crops were expanded, irrigation improved, and energy systems optimized. Humans had always invested in long-term solutions, preparing for the future, and Elias ensured that his legacy on the planet would endure. Lyra assisted, demonstrating that knowledge transfer and cooperation could create lasting results. Finally, the day of departure arrived. Lyra's people gathered near the crafts, preparing for liftoff. Elias watched as she approached him, her movements confident and precise. She placed a hand on his shoulder and then pointed toward the horizon, indicating the journey ahead. Humans had always faced change with courage, and now Elias felt the same resolve. He nodded, acknowledging their shared journey and the strength of their partnership. As the crafts ascended, Elias reflected on the journey that had brought them together. He had faced isolation, predators, storms, and the unknown, yet survived through ingenuity, resourcefulness, and determination. Humans had always thrived by turning challenges into opportunities, and this experience reinforced that truth. Lyra and her people had tested his abilities and, in turn, benefited from his knowledge. Together, they had achieved more than any one species could accomplish alone. The crafts disappeared into the sky, leaving Elias standing on the cliff. The farm below looked more vibrant than ever, strengthened by the lessons learned and the cooperation that had taken place. Humans had always built, preserved, and adapted, and Elias had done so in a way that bridged worlds. The alien presence had been transformative, but even in their absence, the principles of ingenuity, courage, and persistence remained. Elias spent the following days consolidating the lessons learned. He repaired machinery, reinforced structures, and expanded the crops. Humans had always been resilient, capable of turning adversity into progress, and he embodied that tradition fully. Every modification, every improvement, carried the mark of experience gained from an unprecedented partnership. Night fell and Elias sat by the fire. The stars were unfamiliar yet comforting. He thought of Lyra and her people, imagining their journey home and the knowledge they would carry. Humans had always shared ideas, adapted to new environments, and forged connections that strengthened survival. This was the same, only on a galactic scale. He felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Ingenuity, courage, empathy, and cooperation had won the day, proving that humans could not only survive but thrive, even among alien worlds. In the quiet of the night, a soft wind rustled the fields. Elias smiled, feeling the satisfaction of work well done and the pride of knowing he had faced the unknown and succeeded. Humans had always been survivors, builders, and innovators, and now he had demonstrated those traits on a planet far from home, with allies from another world. The lessons, friendships, and experiences would endure, a testament to human determination and the universal value of cooperation. As he gazed at the stars, Elias realized that this was only the beginning. The universe was vast, full of unknown challenges and opportunities. Humans had always been explorers, inventors, and problem solvers. Now he carried the proof that ingenuity, courage, and empathy were forces that could transcend species, worlds, and even the isolation of space. He was ready for whatever came next, confident in the timeless strength of humanity. The farm, once a solitary refuge, had become a symbol of resilience, collaboration, and hope. Elias knew that he could face storms, predators, or even the unknown void of space, and endure. Humans had always survived through ingenuity, adaptability, and cooperation. Now standing alone but stronger than ever, Elias understood that those qualities would guide him into the future wherever it might lead. And as the twin suns set over the horizon, Elias smiled. The world was alive, full of possibility, and he was ready. Humans had always faced the impossible and had always triumphed.